The NBA Finals tip off on Thursday, so want to sort of, as we are going to maybe slow play a little bit, we were very NBA Finals heavy towards the end of last week, so I wanted to sort of take a different angle today and look at some of the interesting betting odds and such, and how this stacks up historically in terms of where we are at here, because the Boston Celtics have been, pretty much a wagon all season long. And yes, we have plenty of times acknowledged the fact that they definitely benefited in the postseason from an easier playoff path, but the reality of the situation was that coming into this season, we knew it was the Boston Celtics Eastern Conference to lose, and they didn't, and they cruised their way through it. Again, you want to dive into the topic of conversation about the level of difficulty, all power to you, but at this point, again, I think that we sort of knew where the Celtics were in comparison to their opponents in the conference, and they steamroll their way to get here. Facing an unlikely opponent, though, in the Dallas Mavericks, a 5 seed coming into the playoffs, went on the road in every single one of these series, and were able to do so, I wouldn't say with ease necessarily. The Clippers definitely pushed them some in the first round. There is a legitimate argument to make that the Thunder, had they just hit their open looks, they could have very easily, and some people are sort of pointing to that foul on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at the end of that game against PJ Washington as to, that falls differently. Maybe the Mavericks aren't in this position, but again, you can sort of play the playoff path game, but at the end of the day, the Mavericks are here, and a lot of people are picking them to win this series. Vegas is not, though. The Celtics are minus 210 favorites. Mavericks are plus 175 as of this morning to be the NBA champions this season. Bill Simmons of The Ringer put out a stat about since the merger, the NBA-ABA merger in 1976, if the Mavericks were to win this series, they would be the third biggest underdogs to win the NBA Finals. I believe the two teams that he mentioned had longer odds were the 2004 Pistons when they were playing the Kobe and Shaq Lakers, and the 2019 Raptors when they were going up against that Warriors team with Kevin Durant, that obviously injuries ended up playing a piece in that. But again, Vegas does not necessarily see it to be as close of a series maybe as a lot of the public does, because there's been a ton of momentum sort of building up here with the Mavericks over the course of the past few weeks, and especially doing so against the Timberwolves team that a lot of people, including myself, said that the winner of that Timberwolves versus Nuggets series was going to go on to win the finals, or to win the Western Conference at least, and had a great chance to win the finals. And then the Mavericks came in as just a total sort of matchup with a matchup advantage, and were able to just pick apart the Timberwolves in a way that the Nuggets weren't, and now here they are. I think that the Celtics are much better geared towards, I think that ultimately when you look at the Timberwolves, and we've talked about them plenty, so I don't want to harp on it too much, but they were a team perfectly built to take down the Denver Nuggets. But we knew that the idea of Rudy Gobert, he could be exposed a little bit more if he's pulled out towards the perimeter, and that's what the Mavericks did all series long. Now, I don't think that there is necessarily that same mismatch when you look at this series against the Celtics. The most comparable one would be Al Horford, who we saw him get torched on a number of different occasions, specifically going back to the Cleveland series against Donovan Mitchell. In the Indiana series as well, we did see Tyrese Halliburton towards the end of Game 1 trying to expose Al Horford a little bit in those same pick-and-roll situations. But one thing that is different coming into this series, and again, it's going to be an ongoing chess match, I think, between Joe Mazzulla and Jason Kidd, two head coaches that a lot of people are not fans of, don't have faith in, but I think have done a tremendous job to help get their teams to this position. You know, I know that Jason Kidd, maybe there's some personality stuff with him that a lot of fans don't necessarily love, but you know, the way that he has been able to reshape this Dallas defense and have their interior force be so dominant, I do believe. And also, you want to talk about, you know, I think that casual NBA fans often sort of try to diminish the role of head coaches, and I won't deny that, you know, it does feel like, in comparison to some of the other major sports, that NBA head coaches might not be quite as important because it's such a star-driven league. But because it's a star-driven league, the one thing that everybody is sort of in consensus about is having control over the locker room and getting players to buy in. And that is exactly what Jason Kidd has done, you know, and also, you know, obviously credit to the front office for making the moves they did to get Kyrie, to get Gafford, to get Washington, even if you want to go, again, that little bit of a tanking route that they went towards the final stretch of last season for them to be in better position to make a move for Derek Lively in the NBA draft. But we have seen a level of buy-in from the defensive end and willingness to share to some degree, especially, you know, that more so slanted towards Luka, but Kyrie as well, sort of on that same path. Now, I think that Kyrie has been maybe a little bit more humbled over the course of the past couple years. Not that he's not great. We all know that. It seems like Kyrie fans can be a little bit extra sensitive possibly, but I think that it's great now to see that he has fully bought into being a number two. And because of that, the Mavericks have a great chance to win the championship this year. And I think that Jason Kidd does deserve some credit there. So a little bit of a coaching tangent there, but didn't necessarily touch on it all too much during last week's shows. But this is definitely, you know, legacy series. Again, all the pressure and all the attention is on the players, but Jason Kidd and Joe Mazzulla both have done tremendous jobs this season. Want to highlight that and highlight the fact that, you know, they could very easily garner a lot more respect, because as much as the Celtics are the minus 210 favorites and that the Mavericks have been, I wouldn't say full Cinderella, because coming into the postseason, they were talked about as a potential dark horse, but still an unlikely run to the finals, all things considered. And, you know, I think that both of these teams have different sort of puzzle pieces that are going to be tough to adjust to. Now, the defense on Luka Doncic, we talked about that at length during last week's shows. It is always going to be, you know, just about impossible to fully shut him down. But what are those, you know, other pieces going to be in terms of Celtics' very switchable defense? Are they going to be a little bit still in that same, you know, switching defensive strategy during these, you know, screen situations, but are they maybe going to try and make Luka work a little bit harder to get the matchups that he is searching for, and not so sort of flippantly allow Luka to pick and choose who he wants in that pick and roll situation? All of those different types of things. It's going to be really interesting to see, but I want to briefly talk here about the MVP, finals MVP odds. Jason Tatum is the favorite as things currently stand as of this morning on DraftKings, minus 115. Best player on the team that is favored to win. Pretty straightforward there. From there, it is Luka Doncic at plus 205, Jaylen Brown at plus 650, and Kyrie Irving fourth at plus 2200. Very, very quickly here on Kyrie, because the chances of him actually winning are slim. But the plus 2200 line, especially considering some of the narratives that are going to come into play with this series in terms of the way that Kyrie, we just talked about it, the change in his maturity level and his willingness to accept a different role for a lot of this postseason run. But, let's say the Celtics are completely selling out for Luka Doncic on the defensive end, there are going to be opportunities in front of Kyrie Irving to maybe try and clean up some of the, especially if the Celtics are sending extra pressures, extra blitzes and such. Kyrie Irving may have the other side of the court sort of to himself with numbers. So I'm just saying, especially given the responsibility that Luka is going to probably hold, and that there may be some opportunities opening up for Kyrie with the way that the media is now sort of on a high Kyrie note. He's going to play his former team in the Boston Celtics, which I think is, a little bit more dramatized than his years with the Nets, because it was his first destination after the Cavaliers stint, and it was pretty messy, all things considered, the mesh of him. And again, Boston being the fan base and the market that it is, there was a lot of bad blood there. Joe Mazzulla with an extremely funny quote, just such an interesting guy, but again, youngest head coach to ever make the finals, so definitely accomplished at his age. But he was asked about the Kyrie villain arc and such, and he said that he gave a quote saying, "We're all villains in someone else's eyes." So that was a pretty funny way to sort of downplay the drama there. And Kyrie, on the other end, with his press conferences, I also think that he's done a good job of sort of minimizing that extra noise, and everybody just seems focused on basketball right now. And obviously the media is going to do their things, but this is going to be a terrific matchup in my eyes. Like I mentioned, tips off on Thursday. The Boston Celtics are -6.5 point favorites in that game as things stand. That game obviously taking place in Boston. I'm probably going to, sort of sit on it for a couple days in terms of making my official prediction, but my early lean is definitely with the Celtics, and this would be a monumental, seems maybe a little bit dramatic, but at the same time, this is a huge missed opportunity if the Celtics do end up dropping this series, and I believe that they have the personnel to be able to beat the Mavericks. We're going to be doing later this week a top 10 players in the series, and obviously that's not the perfect way to sort of predict how a series is going to play out, but I'm going to be doing some different exercises looking at this series in different ways. Wanted to come out today, though, as we are headed into, the peak of the NBA season right now, and give a little bit of a betting odds perspective. But again, we will be back with far more NBA finals predictions and such, and keys to the series as the week goes on. I recommend to go check out some of the videos that we put out last week as well if you are looking for some extra content there, because there's a lot we have to get to today. So we are going to be taking our first break right now, and when we come back on the other side, we had a monumental contract extension signed this morning between Justin Jefferson and the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to be breaking down all of the details, the effect it will have on what the Vikings are trying to build for the future, and how it could in turn affect the remainder of the wide receiver market, as we have some big names that are still hanging out there hoping for new contracts. So we're going to be touching on all of that. Stick with us, and we will be right back after this quick break.